Hey everyone, welcome back to Dem DMs. My name is Matt.
I'm Fox Ghost.
And I'm Panda Ghost.
Today we are answering the question how to make your NPCs more impactful in your games. So if everyone's ready, let's slide on in. All right, well, I guess the first question to answer here is what separates a regular, tavern keeper NPC from an impactful NPC? Ones that the characters can connect with and have effect on the story. So, I think the first main key to this is obviously the prevalence in their story that they hold. How often do they come into the story, and what kind of effect that they can have on the story if it's something that they were meant to carve a path for the PCs to go on, right? So this could be things like your quest givers is a typical conversation starter, and also like NPCs that would be along for the ride for any period of time, right?
Right.
Um, I think one comes to mind from our current game was a female paladin that your characters had met, early on in the campaign, not like right at the beginning, but pretty much shortly thereafter. And she started by giving you a quest and accompanying you along on that quest.
Right.
And then she led you into kind of connections with other individuals as well as was kind of the kickoff for future storylines as well. So she definitely had, I think, a level of impact that a typical person you met on the side of the road wouldn't necessarily have.
Right. And I think a lot of that is just how she's written, right? She's written in a way to especially for my character, right, as almost a uh, foil or a reflection
Yeah.
of what my character was going through, right?
Hmm.
And that made my character identify
Yeah.
with her and her significant other too, right?
Yeah, because your character had a story at the beginning and continuing through most of the campaign that related to finding this and this character from your origins, if you will.
Right.
And it mirrored very well to these two characters, Eudora being one of them, that would uh, they were kind of the premonition or the alter to the story path that your character could go on.
Right.
Right? They lost each other. She ended up dying due to certain villains and things like that, and that was kind of before you had even found your that NPC character for your character, right?
Yeah.
So it was
Right.
kind of like,
Right.
oh no, could this be something that would happen for me?
Right.
Um, yeah, and it sets that other character up, the other member of that duo, to be a foil to you as well.
Right.
Almost an identical, Black Mirror. Hilariously, that character went on to be actually taken over by one of our players now, and that storyline has continued
Right.
in a very similar way. But yeah, so interesting. And I think going to your connection, any pre-existing character, something that predates the campaign that somebody has in their backstory. Ideally, those characters are going to be, when introduced in the campaign, are going to be more uh,
Mm-hmm.
interesting for that player, but not for everybody,
Right.
because they don't have that connection. So it's kind of how do you make them interested in them as well,
Right. And
right?
impactful NPCs don't have to just apply to the whole party. It can only be, one character finds that NPC um, impactful to their experience, right? Where someone
Hmm.
else might, like, again, going back to my character, his significant other Millie, you know, no one else in the party has any connection to her. Just like how um, the Elaine, was that what it was? Her name is that impacts
Aline,
Fox.
Aline,
yeah,
Aline.
Aline, yeah, that Fox's character gets embroiled in. She has no bearing on my character, right?
yeah. what's interesting there is that was kind of falls into the latter category that a lot of DMs see happen the most, which is just really dumb luck from characters interacting with certain NPCs that you were like, I didn't really intend for them to be important, but I guess now they are, so that's fine. That Aline character that you mentioned was
Right.
kind of just like a little like Easter egg. I was like, if they find this, it could be a small little thing, and it actually turned out to be, a huge driving force for Fox Ghost's character for a little bit of time, and then kind of took that character specifically, was elevated a little bit higher in the importance of the overall story, and that kind of just went off from there. She is effectively one of the lead villains of this campaign, and it made was a very random side thing that almost nobody engaged with except for obviously Fox Ghost.
Right.
So yeah.
And that brings up another really interesting point, is just like, especially with those random dumb luck characters becoming popular with the party, they only continue to be impactful to the party once, or if you continue to incorporate them into the campaign and steer them with the party's, what the party likes about that character. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree so. And it's when do you introduce them? When do you
Right.
if it's a character that's going to keep coming back up, when do you reintroduce them? That becomes very important. I think, as we talked about, like very early in the campaign, not like the very beginning, but like shortly after the campaign starts, you'll find that those NPCs that are interacted with during that time tend to be a little bit more impactful for the characters because they have the time to grow with that NPC.
Right.
Over the course of a campaign or an adventure. For instance, one that some people might know, Leosin from the Tiamat campaign, was a character that was introduced very early on, and then the writers kind of wrote in a small instance for him to show up periodically throughout the rest of the campaign, such that it makes it kind of your character's main touchstone for a lot of that campaign. And unfortunately for your group, certain decisions were made that led to that character being killed. And because of that, it was, because of his previous bond with the party and being there so often, it was kind of that rug pull that, out from under you that kind of was like, oh my gosh, so I mean, there's a lot of characters that you kind of want to create that feeling of a safe haven, right? A feeling of, when I see this person, I know I don't need to worry about things blowing up in front of me, right? And those can be done with those types of characters, the ones that you kind of seed early on and come back every so often to check in with the party. But I mean, yeah, it does bring up the question: when do you, as a DM, decide to pull the trigger and kill an important NPC? And it's a hard line to walk, because it's a very common trope, I would say. There's a saying out there that don't get attached to anybody because they're probably gonna die. Or if you have any family members in your backstory, be warned, they're probably gonna die during the campaign, right?
Yeah.
And that it's a trope for a reason. It happens a lot, but I feel like it's the most important time is when the player's choices can lead to that character's death, especially like a choice that you as a DM know that they kind of made offhandedly, like, oh, we'll just send that person to go do this, it's fine,
right?
Then we don't have to deal with it, right? And then it's like, oh, I'm going to make you deal with it. You're just going to have to deal with it after the fact, right?
And it could also be a matter of, when does it make good plot relevance, like Eudora's death, for example.
Eudora's death was kind of a Kickstarter for a lot of the current campaign's like main storyline. And so it was kind of that first interaction, not first interaction, that's the wrong way to say it, but it's the first time where the actual machinations behind the scenes of that campaign are being revealed to you very briefly. It's showing there is somebody behind these issues. It's not just the world blowing up, somebody's making it blow up, right? And that was a perfect way to show that with a character that you already knew.
Right. And you're able to introduce a villain that also, greatly impacted Fox Ghost here.
Right. Yeah, so that was so that character, so basically two NPCs, one from so kind of going back to like the types of NPCs that we see is like we had one NPC that came from my character's backstory and another NPC that was kind of one of our, one of the characters that we grew attached to, and there was a conflict between those two NPCs. Unfortunately, Eudora ended up losing her life, and the NPC from my backstory ended up being a villain, which was like a stab in the back.
Yeah, because up until that point, that character was basically family to your character, and it was kind of a,
it's like
a weird twist on that. Yeah,
like the old family has betrayed the new family, almost kind of.
Sure. Yeah, and I feel like there's, it's funny how impactful an NPC can be if you do that correctly, or at least if the player engages with it. For instance, Fox Ghost, your character went cleric pretty much based off of the connection that they had to another NPC, and that wasn't a decision ahead of time. That was a decision made based off of interactions with those NPCs.
Right. And going back to Leosin, at the end of that campaign, it was basically said that my character from that campaign would follow in the footsteps of Leosin and join I can't recall. Yeah, the Harpers. Right. So it just shows you that death of an impactful NPC can drive your PCs down a path they originally didn't even think about.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing is you need to create characters if you're trying to make something be an impactful NPC, rather than kind of just stepping into it. It really requires you to think about who are my characters and who are my players, what types of characters do they enjoy engaging with, and write a character for that rather than trying to just put out something random to be interesting for a second. The wow factor wears off pretty quick.
And you gotta make those impactful NPCs feel human. You really gotta write kind of just like you would a player character. You should really write like a little bit of a backstory, kind of like what their interests are, what their things they like, dislike, and just kind of flesh them out, because that way at least one of your PCs is going to find that connection with that NPC.
Yeah. So I mean, I hope if you want to ask us more questions, by all means, do so down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us NPCs from your games that you enjoyed, or if you have disagreements with things that we've said, put it down in the comments. Obviously, we'd love to hear anything. So, but I think we're gonna wrap this video up here. But as always, thanks for joining us, and we'll join you next time when we slide on into Dem DMs. All right, have a good day, everybody.
Peace.
Bye. Thank you for watching the Dem DMs podcast. We release a new video every Thursday. Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments down below. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Also, be sure to smite that like button, subscribe, and sneak attack that notification bell to ensure that you're up to date on all our new content.